Commander Jake Mitchell stood on the bridge of the human research ship Endeavour, staring at the stars through the large window. He had been in space for 15 years, but he had never seen anything like what was happening now. Ships were everywhere, moving fast away from the center of the galaxy. Alien ships of all shapes and sizes filled the space around them. "Commander, I'm getting more signals," said Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez from her seat at the communications desk. Her fingers moved quickly over the controls as she tried to make sense of the strange messages coming from the alien ships. They're all saying the same thing. They're running from something. Jake walked over to Amy's station. The sounds coming from the speakers were unlike anything he had heard before. Some were high and musical, others were deep and rumbling, but even though he couldn't understand the words, he could hear the fear in every voice. "How many ships have we counted so far?" Jake asked. "Over 3,000 in this sector alone," said Dr. Ben Cooper, looking up from his computer screen. Ben was the ship's expert on alien life, and he had been studying the fleeing ships for weeks. "And that's just what we can see. There are probably millions more out there." Captain Lisa Barnes, who had been quiet until now, stood up from her chair. She was older than the others, with gray hair and tired eyes. She had been one of the first humans to make contact with alien races, and she knew more about them than anyone else on the ship. "I've never seen anything like this," Lisa said. "These aren't just a few ships. Entire civilizations are moving. The Zephyrians have been around for millions of years, and they're abandoning their home worlds. The Karathi Empire has the strongest military in the galaxy, and they're running too." Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. If beings that powerful were scared enough to leave everything behind, what could be chasing them? "Amy, can you get a clear signal from any of them?" Jake asked. Amy worked at her controls for several minutes. Static filled the air, mixed with strange alien sounds. Then suddenly a voice came through clearly. It was speaking in broken human language. Human ship, can you hear us?" Jake grabbed the microphone. "This is Commander Mitchell of the Earth ship Endeavour. We can hear you. What's happening out there?" There was a long pause. Then the voice came back, sounding scared and tired. "You must run, young species. The Devourers wake from their long sleep. We run as our ancestors ran before us. You must take your people and flee before they consume your light." "Devourers? What are Devourers?" Jake asked. "Ancient hunger. Ancient death. They come from the deep places between the stars. They eat everything, worlds, stars, life itself. Nothing stops them. Only running saves us." Lisa stepped forward and took the microphone. "We're Captain Barnes. We want to help. Can you tell us more?" "No help possible. Only running. We go to the edge of the galaxy, far from their reach. You must do the same. Take your species and run now before it's too late." The signal went dead. Amy tried to get it back, but the alien ship was already too far away. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then Ben spoke up. "I've been looking at the data from the abandoned worlds we've found," he said. "This has happened before. Many times. I can see the patterns in the ruins. Every 50,000 years or so, all the advanced civilizations disappear. They leave behind empty cities and warnings carved in stone." "What kind of warnings?" Jake asked. Ben pulled up images on the main screen. Ancient writing covered stone walls, but the pictures were clear enough. They showed dark shapes consuming planets, stars going out, and beings fleeing in terror. "The same message over and over," Ben said. "Run, hide, don't fight. The Devourers cannot be stopped." Amy looked up from her station. "Commander, I'm getting reports from Earth. The alien ships are sending the same message to everyone. Every human colony, every space station. They're all being told to evacuate immediately." Jake walked back to the window and looked out at the stream of alien ships. Thousands of different species, some so advanced they seemed like gods to humans, all running from the same threat. Their technology was beyond anything humans could imagine, their civilizations older than human history, and they were all terrified. "Sir," Amy said, "there's a message coming in from Earth Command. They want all ships to return home immediately for an emergency meeting." Jake nodded. "Set course for Earth. Maximum speed." As the Endeavour turned toward home, Jake kept watching the alien ships. They moved in long lines, entire fleets carrying billions of beings away from everything they had ever known. Some of the ships were beautiful, made of crystal that caught the starlight. Others were massive metal structures that looked like floating cities. All of them were running. Dr. Cooper joined him at the window. "What do you think, Commander? Should we run too?" Jake was quiet for a long time. He thought about Earth, about the 10 billion humans living their lives, not knowing that ancient horrors were waking up somewhere in the galaxy. He thought about his own family back on Earth, his sister and her children. "I don't know, Ben," Jake finally said. "But I do know one thing. Humans have never been good at running away from a fight." Ben looked surprised. "But Commander, these aliens have technology we can't even understand. If they're scared enough to abandon everything, what chance do we have?" Jake smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. "Maybe that's exactly why we might have a chance. They've been running from this threat for millions of years. Maybe they've forgotten how to do anything else." The stars streamed past as the Endeavour raced toward Earth, carrying news that would change humanity's future forever. Behind them, the great exodus continued, alien civilizations fleeing toward the edge of the galaxy. But ahead of them, on a small blue world, 10 billion humans waited, unaware that they would soon have to make the most important choice in galactic history. Run or fight, follow the wisdom of millions of years, or trust in something that had kept humanity alive since they first picked up rocks to defend themselves from predators. The choice would define not just humanity's fate, but the future of every living thing in the galaxy. 3 weeks had passed since the Endeavour returned to Earth with news of the great alien exodus. The blue planet that had always seemed so peaceful now buzzed with activity as ships came and went from the orbital stations. Every government on Earth was meeting. Every military base was active, and every news channel talked about the same thing. Should humanity run or stay? President Karen Taylor stood in the Great Hall of the United Nations building in New York. Around her sat representatives from every nation on Earth. The room was full of worried voices speaking in dozens of languages, but they were all asking the same questions. What were these devourers? How long did humanity have? And most importantly, what should they do? Admiral Steve Johnson walked to the front of the room. He was a tall man with short gray hair and the kind of serious face that made people listen when he spoke. He had been in charge of Earth's space defenses for 10 years, and now everyone was looking to him for answers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Johnson said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "We have two choices. We can follow the aliens' advice and begin evacuating Earth immediately, or we can stay and prepare to fight whatever is coming." A woman from the European Federation stood up. "Admiral, how long would an evacuation take?" "Our best estimates say it would take at least 50 years to move everyone off Earth," Johnson replied. "And that's if we had enough ships, which we don't. We could maybe save 2 billion people. The other 8 billion would be left behind." The room erupted in worried voices. Representatives shouted questions and argued with each other. Some demanded that they start building evacuation ships immediately. Others said it was impossible to abandon so many people. Colonel Ryan Hayes stood up from his seat near the back of the room. He was younger than the Admiral, with dark hair and scars on his hands from his years as a soldier. When he spoke, his voice was calm but strong. "I've been a soldier for 20 years, Ryan said. "I've fought in wars on 3 different worlds. I've seen good people die defending what they loved, but I've never seen soldiers run away and leave their families behind." "This is different, Colonel," said a representative from the Asian Alliance. "These aliens have technology we can't imagine. They've been around for millions of years. If they're scared enough to run, what makes you think we can fight?" Ryan smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. "Maybe that's exactly the problem. They've been running for so long they've forgotten how to fight. Humans don't run. We never have. When the first human saw a wild animal trying to hurt his family, he didn't run. He picked up a rock and fought back." Dr. Grace Turner, who had been sitting quietly until now, stood up. She was the head of Earth's engineering corps, the woman responsible for building humanity's spaceships and weapons. She was small and thin, but when she spoke, everyone listened. I've been studying the alien technology we've seen, she said. It's impressive, but it's all designed for running and hiding. Their ships are fast, but they don't have many weapons. Their shields are good at protecting them, but not at attacking. They've built everything around the idea of escape. What are you suggesting, Dr. Turner? President Taylor asked. I'm suggesting we do what humans do best. We adapt. We fight. We turn everything we have into weapons. Grace pulled out a small device and pressed a button. Images appeared on the eye screen at the front of the room. We can modify our mining equipment to become weapons. We can turn our cargo ships into warships. We can build defenses around every planet in our solar system. An older man from the African Union shook his head. But we don't even know what these devourers are. How can we fight something we've never seen? Dr. Matt Collins, who had spent the last 3 weeks interviewing alien refugees, stood up. He was a thin man with thick glasses who studied how different species thought and acted. I've talked to representatives from 15 different alien species, Matt said. And I've learned something interesting. They all have the same response: to danger, run away and hide. It's built into their cultures, their religions, their very way of thinking. For millions of years, the only species that survived were the ones that ran away fast enough. And? Someone called out. And that means they've never actually tried to fight these devourers. They just assume it's impossible because that's what they've always been taught. But humans are different. We've always fought back against things that threatened us. Maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs. President Taylor looked around the room. She could see the fear in people's faces, but she could also see something else. Determination. The same stubborn refusal to give up that had helped humans survive ice ages, plagues, and wars. Admiral Johnson, she said, how long do we have before these devourers reach Earth? Based on the alien reports, about 18 months, maybe 2 years, Johnson replied. Then we have 18 months to prepare. Taylor's voice grew stronger. We're not running away. We're not abandoning 8 billion people. We're going to stand and fight. The room exploded with voices again, but this time they weren't just scared. People were talking about plans, about weapons, about how to defend their world. Colonel Hayes was already talking to military leaders about converting civilian ships into warships. Dr. Turner was making lists of equipment that could be turned into weapons. Outside the United Nations building, the news spread quickly. Some people were terrified. Others were angry. But many felt something they hadn't expected. Hope. For the first time since the alien warnings began, humanity wasn't just waiting for disaster. They were doing something about it. In space, the alien ships continued their long journey toward the edge of the galaxy. Most of them had no idea that one small blue planet had decided not to follow them. The young species they had warned was making a choice that no civilization had made in 50,000 years. They were choosing to stand and fight. On Earth, the real work was just beginning. Factories that had made cars and computers began making weapons and armor. Spaceports that had sent out cargo ships began launching warships. And in military bases around the world, soldiers who had never expected to fight aliens began training. For the most important battle in human history, the devourers were coming. But for the first time in millions of years, they would find someone waiting for them who wasn't running away. They would find humanity, standing ready to fight. 6 months had passed since humanity decided to stay and fight. The solar system looked very different now. Where there had once been peaceful mining stations and research outposts, there were now weapons and soldiers. Every moon, every asteroid, every space station had been turned into a fortress. But the preparations came too late for some places. Captain Nick Palmer stood on the bridge of the rescue ship Defiance, staring at where Titan used to be. The moon, that had housed 50,000 miners and their families, was gone. Not destroyed, not broken apart, but completely gone. In its place was empty space, as if Titan had never existed at all. "Sir, there's nothing left," said his second officer, Lieutenant Dave Brooks. "No debris, no radiation, no trace that anything was ever here." Nick had been a rescue pilot for 12 years. He had seen accidents, explosions, and disasters of all kinds, but he had never seen anything like this. It wasn't just that the people were gone. The entire moon, Billions of tons of rock and metal and ice had simply vanished. "What about Europa?" Nick asked. Dave checked his instruments. "Same thing. So are the research station, the ice miners, everything. Gone without a trace." Nick felt sick to his stomach. Europa had been home to 20,000 scientists and workers. Now there wasn't even dust left behind to show they had ever lived. "Send a message to Earth Command," Nick said. "The Devourers have reached the outer colonies. They're not just killing people. They're consuming everything." 3 days later, the first real battle began at Proxima Centauri. Commodore Rachel Foster commanded a fleet of 30 ships that had once been cargo vessels and passenger liners. They were painted gray now and covered with weapons that Dr. Grace Turner's teams had built in the months since the decision to fight. Rachel stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Valiant, watching her screens as strange shapes appeared at the edge of the system. The Devourers didn't look like any ship or creature she had ever seen. They were dark, shifting things that seemed to bend light around them. Some were as big as buildings, others as large as cities. They moved without making any noise, sliding through space like oil through water. "All ships, this is Commodore Foster," Rachel said into her radio. "Remember your training. Hit them hard and fast, then get out of there. Don't try to be heroes." The human ships opened fire first. Lasers and missiles flew toward the dark shapes. For a moment, Rachel thought they might have a chance. The weapons seemed to hit their targets, and she saw flashes of light as explosions bloomed in space. But then the dark shapes began to change. They grew larger, absorbing the energy from the human weapons. The lasers that should have cut through them instead seemed to feed them. The missiles that exploded against them only made them stronger. "Pull back. All ships pull back," Rachel shouted, but it was too late. The Devourers moved faster than anything she had ever seen. One moment they were far away. The next they were surrounding human ships like hungry wolves. When they touched the hull of the cargo ship Phoenix, the entire vessel simply disappeared, leaving nothing behind but empty space. Rachel watched in horror as ship after ship vanished. The Bremen, the Cairo, the New Tokyo, all gone in seconds. Her fleet of 30 ships was down to 15, then 10, then 5. "Commodore," Chief Engineer Tom Bradley's voice came over the radio from the engine room. "I'm reading something strange. These things, they're not just eating our ships, they're eating the energy patterns. But there's something they can't process." "What do you mean?" Rachel asked as she watched another ship disappear. "The chaos algorithms Dr. Turner built into our weapons, the random pattern generators. When I run those through our shields, the creatures pull back." Rachel didn't fully understand what Tom was talking about, but she understood enough. All remaining ships switched to chaos mode on all weapons and shields, random patterns only. Lieutenant Kelly Murphy was flying one of the small fighter ships that had been built from mining equipment. She was young, only 23, but she had grown up playing video games and flying racing ships. When she heard Rachel's order, she flipped the switches that activated the chaos systems. Her ship's weapons began firing in completely random patterns. Instead of steady laser beams, they flickered and danced. Instead of straight-flying missiles, they spun and weaved through space like drunken birds. The first devourer she hit with these chaotic weapons didn't absorb the energy. Instead, it seemed to shiver and pull back. Kelly pressed her attack, firing everything she had with maximum randomness. The dark creature writhed and twisted, then suddenly collapsed into itself and disappeared. "I got one!" Kelly shouted over the radio. "The chaos weapons work." The remaining human ships quickly switched all their systems to chaos mode. It wasn't easy to fight with weapons that fired randomly, but it worked. The devourers that had seemed unstoppable moments before began to retreat. When the battle was over, only 8 human ships remained out of 30. But they had won. For the first time in 50,000 years, someone had fought the devourers and lived to tell about it. Dr. Claire Adams was waiting when the survivors returned to the main base on Mars. She was a scientist who studied alien technology, and she had been working day and night to understand how the devourers functioned. "I need to examine everything," she told Rachel as the Commodore climbed out of her ship. "Every piece of data, every recording, every scrap of information about how they fought." Rachel was tired and heartbroken over the ships she had lost, but she knew Claire was right. "What do you think we're dealing with, Doctor?" Claire pulled up images on her computer screen. "They're not really alive, not the way we understand life. They're more like living equations, mathematical patterns that consume energy and matter to grow larger and more complex." "Then how did we beat them?" "That's the interesting part," Claire said, her eyes bright with excitement. "They can adapt to any predictable pattern. That's why the aliens always lose. Their technology is logical, organized, predictable. But humans," she smiled, "humans are chaotic. We're unpredictable. We make decisions based on emotion and instinct. We create weapons that don't follow logical patterns." Rachel felt a strange mix of hope and fear. "So we can fight them?" "We can do more than fight them," Claire said. "We can do something no other species has ever done. We can confuse them. They've spent millions of years learning to predict and counter logical attacks. But they've never faced anything like human creativity." The news of the victory at Proxima Centauri spread quickly throughout human space. On Earth, President Taylor announced that humanity's first major battle against the Devourers had been won. The cost was high, but the victory proved that the creatures could be beaten. In the refugee ships still fleeing toward the edge of the galaxy, alien commanders received reports of the battle with disbelief. Some thought the humans were lying. Others thought they were insane. But a few, mostly younger aliens who hadn't been taught to fear the Devourers from birth, began to wonder if maybe the humans were on to something. For the first time in galactic history, the idea that someone could stand and fight the Devourers didn't seem completely impossible. But the real test was still coming. The creatures Rachel had fought were just scouts. Somewhere in the depths of space, the main Devourer force was gathering, preparing for an assault that would make the battle at Proxima Centauri look like a small skirmish. Humanity had won its first battle. Now they had to prepare for war. News of humanity's victory at Proxima Centauri spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. In the great refugee fleets still fleeing toward the edge of space, alien commanders gathered around communication screens, watching the battle. Recordings that human ships had transmitted. Most of the older aliens shook their heads in disbelief. The Karathi War Master Dekmol called the humans foolish younglings who will bring doom upon us all. The ancient Zephyrian Council declared that humanity's actions would only anger the Devourers and make them stronger. But not all aliens felt this way. In a small scout ship traveling with the Karathi fleet, a young warrior named Zektar watched the human battle footage for the 10th time. He was different from most of his people. While other Karathi had been taught from birth that running from the Devourers was the only way to survive, Zektar had always wondered what would happen if someone actually fought back. "The humans did it," he whispered to himself. "They actually hurt the Devourers." In another part of the galaxy, a Zephyrian scientist called Crystal Song of Hope was having similar thoughts. Her crystalline body glowed with excitement as she studied the data from the human battle. For her entire life, she had been told that the Devourers were unstoppable. But the humans had proven that wrong. Both young aliens made the same decision at the same time. They turned their ships around and headed toward Earth. Commander Paul Wright was surprised when the first alien volunteers arrived at the Mars training facility. He had been a drill instructor for 15 years, teaching human soldiers how to fight. He had never expected to teach aliens. "You want to learn human fighting techniques?" Paul asked Zektar, who stood nearly 8 feet tall and had 4 arms. "Yes," the Karathi warrior replied in broken English. "My people run for 50,000 years. I want to learn how to not run." Crystal Song of Hope floated nearby, her crystal body changing colors as she spoke. "My species has forgotten how to be brave. Teach us to remember." Over the next few weeks, more aliens arrived. Not many, just a few dozen from different species. Most were young, and all of them were tired of running. They wanted to learn what humans called fighting spirit. Paul quickly discovered that teaching aliens to fight like humans was much harder than he had expected. Sergeant Linda Scott, who helped run the training program, pulled him aside after the first week. "Sir, we have a problem," Linda said. "These aliens are too civilized. They've spent millions of years evolving past the instincts that make humans good fighters." "What do you mean?" Paul asked. "Watch this," Linda said. She led him to the training ground where Zektar was practicing with human weapons. The big alien was incredibly strong and fast, but when Linda shouted "enemy attack," he immediately looked around for the nearest exit instead of preparing to fight. See? His first instinct is still to run. It's built into his genes after millions of years of evolution. We need to teach them to think like humans, not just fight like humans. This became the biggest challenge of the program. Human instructors had to teach aliens not just how to use weapons, but how to feel anger, how to be stubborn, how to refuse to give up even when things looked hopeless. Some aliens couldn't do it. A group of peaceful vegan merchants tried the training for 3 days before giving up and returning to their refugee fleets. But others, like Zektar and Crystal Song of Hope, slowly began to change. Meanwhile, the main devourer force was moving closer to human space. General Chris Murphy commanded the Combined Human Defense Fleet, a collection of converted civilian ships and newly built warships. His job was to slow down the creatures as much as possible while Earth prepared its final defenses. Chris used tactics that no military academy had ever taught. His ships would attack devourer formations, then scatter in all directions. They would set traps using fake distress signals, then disappear when the creatures arrived. They would attack from 3 different directions at once, then retreat through asteroid fields where the devourers couldn't easily follow. "It's not about winning battles," Chris explained to his captains during a strategy meeting. "It's about being annoying. We want these things confused and frustrated. Every minute we delay them is another minute for Earth to get ready." The hit and run. Attacks worked better than anyone had hoped. The devourers, used to fighting predictable enemies, didn't know how to respond to human guerrilla tactics. They would arrive at a system expecting a normal battle, only to find that the human ships had already left, taking everything valuable with them. Back on Earth, Dr. Alex Turner was working on humanity's secret weapon. Based on the data from the Proxima Centauri battle, she had developed something she called the Chaos Engine. It was a device that could generate truly random energy patterns, the kind that seemed to hurt the devourers most. The problem with most random number generators, Alex explained to President Taylor, is that they're not really random. They follow mathematical patterns that the devourers can eventually figure out. But this device uses quantum uncertainty to create patterns that are genuinely unpredictable. The first test of the Chaos Engine took place on a small asteroid base near Jupiter. Captain Janet White commanded the experimental ship Lucky Strike, which had been fitted with the new weapon. When a small group of devourers attacked the base, Janet activated the Chaos Engine. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The dark creatures, which had been moving confidently toward their target, suddenly stopped. They writhed and twisted as if in pain, then began to break apart. "It's working," Janet shouted over the radio. "The Chaos Engine is tearing them apart." But the real surprise came afterward. Instead of just retreating, some of the devourers actually died. For the first time in galactic history, someone had found a way to permanently destroy the creatures. The success of the Chaos Engine gave humanity hope, but it also had an unexpected effect on the alien refugees. News of the weapon spread through the fleeing fleets, and more young aliens began to turn their ships around. Zektar was among the first to volunteer for combat duty. After months of training, he had learned to think more like a human. When faced with danger, his first thought was no longer to run, but to fight back. "I am ready," he told Commander Wright. "Teach me to use human weapons in battle." Crystal Song of Hope had also changed. Her crystalline body now glowed with colors that her people associated with anger and determination, emotions that most Zephyrians had forgotten how to feel. As more aliens joined the human forces, something unprecedented began to happen. Species that had been fleeing for thousands of years started to slow down, then stop, then turn around. The ancient vegan protectorate, which had been dormant for centuries, suddenly activated emergency military protocols. The Altarian collective began, converting their merchant ships into warships. Even some of the younger Karathi warriors began to question their elders' insistence on running away. For the first time in 50,000 years, multiple species were preparing to stand and fight alongside each other. But the devourers were not finished. Sensing that their prey was no longer running, the main force began to move faster toward the center of the galaxy. They were coming to finish what they had started, and they were bringing enough power to consume entire star systems. The final battle was approaching, and everyone knew it. On Earth, in the refugee fleets, and in the dark spaces between the stars, both sides prepared for a confrontation that would determine the future of all life in the galaxy. The age of running was ending. The age of fighting back had begun. The final battle began on a Tuesday morning when the sun was shining brightly over Earth. Admiral Peter Clark stood in the command center on Luna Base, watching the largest fleet in human history gather around the blue planet. 600 human ships floated in space alongside vessels from 17 different alien species that had decided to stop running. "Sir, long-range sensors are picking up the main devourer force," reported Lieutenant Mike Torres from his station. "They're bigger than anything we've seen before." Peter looked at the screen and felt his heart sink. The creatures approaching Earth were not like the scouts they had fought before. These were massive, continent-sized beings that seemed to eat light itself. Space around them looked twisted and wrong, as if reality was bending under their weight. "How many?" Peter asked. "Over 200 major entities, sir, plus thousands of smaller ones." Captain Holly Anderson's voice came over the radio from the orbital defense platform above North America. "Admiral, we're ready up here. All weapons are loaded with chaos ammunition. The orbital cannons are charged and waiting." On the surface of Earth, Colonel Jerry Ford coordinated the ground-based defenses. Massive energy weapons had been built into mountains and hidden in forests. If the space battle failed, Earth itself would become a weapon. The first wave of devourers reached the outer edge of the solar system at noon. They moved like a dark tide, consuming asteroids and small moons as they passed. The human alien fleet met them near Jupiter, and the battle began immediately. Captain Zektar, now commanding his own ship filled with both human and Karathi crew members, led the first attack. His vessel, the Defiant Hope, had been built using both human and alien technology. It was fast, unpredictable, and armed with the latest chaos weapons. "For all the worlds that never got to fight back," Zektar shouted as his ship dove toward a massive devourer. His crew fired everything they had, chaos energy tearing holes in the creature's dark form. Crystal Song of Hope commanded a squadron of small fighters, her crystalline body glowing bright blue with battle fury. She had learned to feel anger from her human teachers, and now she used that anger to fuel her attacks. "These monsters took our courage for 50,000 years," she said over the radio as her fighters swarmed around a devourer like angry bees. "Today we take it back." The battle raged for hours. Ships from both sides were destroyed, leaving trails of fire and debris across the solar system. The humans and their alien allies fought with everything they had, but the devourers were stronger than ever. They had grown huge during their journey, feeding on the fear of the fleeing civilizations. By evening, half the defending fleet was gone. The devourers had broken through the outer defenses and were approaching Earth itself. Admiral Clark watched the giant creatures closing in on his homeworld and knew that conventional weapons would not be enough. "Dr. Lee," he called to the chief scientist. "Is the core conversion ready?" Dr. Susan Lee looked up from her computer with tired eyes. "It's ready, sir, but if we activate it and something goes wrong, we could destroy the planet ourselves." The plan was desperate and dangerous. Using technology learned from studying the devourers, human scientists had found a way to turn Earth's molten core into a massive chaos engine. The energy pulse would be powerful enough to affect every devourer in the solar system, but it could also tear the planet apart. President Taylor, now aboard the command ship Terra's Pride, gave the final authorization. "Do it, better to die fighting than to live as food." Engineer Danny Morris, working deep beneath the surface in a facility built near the Earth's core, began the conversion process. Beside him worked Crystal Mind of Dawn, an alien physicist who had joined the project. Together, Human and alien, scientists prepared to turn their world into a weapon. Above them, the largest devourers began their final assault on Earth. Their massive forms blocked out the sun as they descended toward the planet. Captain Holly Anderson and her crew fired every weapon they had, but the creatures were too big and too strong. "Admiral, they're breaking through," Holly shouted over the radio. "I can't stop them." That was when Danny activated the core conversion. Deep beneath the Earth's surface, the planet's molten heart began to change. Instead of the steady nuclear fires that had burned for billions of years, chaos energy started to build. The effect was immediate. The devourers attacking Earth suddenly stopped moving. They writhed and twisted as waves of unpredictable energy washed over them. These creatures, which had fed on order and pattern for millions of years, could not process the pure chaos that Earth was now generating. But the planet was shaking itself apart. Mountains cracked, oceans boiled, and the very air seemed to catch fire. Everyone on Earth could feel the world trembling beneath their feet. "It's working, but the planet can't take much more," Danny shouted over the noise of breaking rock and screaming metal. Then Crystal Mind of Dawn made a crucial adjustment to the chaos field. Instead of random destruction, she created patterns within the chaos, stable islands in the storm of energy. The planet stopped shaking, but the chaos pulse continued to tear apart the devourers. One by one, the massive creatures began to collapse. Their dark forms unraveled like old cloth, dissolving into nothing. The smaller devourers throughout the solar system simply vanished, unable to maintain their existence in the face of true chaos. When it was over, space around Earth was empty except for the defending ships. The creatures that had terrorized the galaxy for millions of years were gone, destroyed by the very unpredictability that made humans and their allies so dangerous. The victory came at a cost. Thousands of ships had been lost and millions of brave humans and aliens had died in the battle. But Earth survived, and with it, hope for the entire galaxy. Admiral Jake Mitchell, now promoted from his position on the research ship Endeavour, stood on the observation deck of the new Joint Species Defense Academy on Mars. Below him, human and alien students trained together, learning to fight as one force. "You know what I think the most important thing we taught the galaxy was?" Jake said to Captain Lisa Barnes, who had come to visit the academy. "What's that?" Lisa asked. "That some things are worth fighting for, no matter how scared you are. For 50,000 years, everyone in the galaxy lived in fear. But fear only has power if you let it control you." Outside the academy, construction crews from a dozen different species were building deep space monitoring stations. The galaxy would never again be caught unprepared by cosmic threats. When the next danger appeared, they would be ready to face it together. In the refugee fleets now returning to their abandoned homeworlds, children who had never seen their planets were finally going home. They carried with them stories of the humans who taught their parents to be brave, and of the great battle where running stopped and fighting began. The age of fear was over. The age of courage had begun. And at the center of it all was a small, blue planet whose people had never learned how to give up. The galaxy was finally free.